Why would I?
I couldn't tell if he was lying or not, but the quick glance toward the black jacket hanging over the back of a chair seemed like some sort of a tell. Back to Linda. He wasn't living with her anymore. I had that conversation with her personally before she died. He gave me a steady gaze, revealing nothing.
What are you getting at?
I met the stare. Basically, money. Linda's accounts are missing a lot of it. He put on a gentle smile.
Linda was such a generous woman, so caring, so giving. She wanted Dad and me to have a good life.
You're saying she willingly gave most of her fortune to an unrelated man she'd known for only a few years? They were never legally married. Her daughter has been going through her records and...
That Rosalie is a liar and a bitch. She's the one who coerced her mother into cutting my dad out.
He straightened and stood up.
I think you'd better speak to my lawyer.
I stood as well. We'd be happy to do that. Give me the contact information. He held up an index finger and turned away. The moment he disappeared down a short hallway, I leapt on the black jacket, running my hands over it. A crinkling sound, fingers fished down into a pocket, and I came out with a receipt. Valley Pawn. It was stapled to a card, but I didn't have time to look. I jammed both items into the side pocket of my purse a split second before Alex came back into the room.
My attorney is with one of the top firms in the city.
He handed over a business card with a little flourish. I took it before he realized that if I really were a cop, I'd be taking him downtown, and that's where the lawyer would come into it. I pocketed the card and headed for the door. In a decent Columbo imitation, I stopped just before touching the handle. One other question. Chaco Canor. His composure slipped just a tad, and the smug smile disappeared.
What about him?
He and your father seem to do a lot of business. Alex turned away and pretended to straighten a white vase on the white shelves beside the white fireplace. When he turned back toward me, his smooth calm was back.
I don't know the man.
Smug little creep.
If you'll excuse me, I'm supposed to be at the funeral home in 30 minutes,
he said, effectively pushing me out the door.
In the future, you cops should speak directly with my attorney.
Wait, you said that earlier. What makes you think I'm a police officer?
You and Hernandez. He was here yesterday. So you're not?
I thought back. I'd been sitting in my car after a frustrated attempt to get upstairs to see Alex. Hernandez and I had exchanged a few words. Alex must have been observing. I had to wonder what else he'd been watching. Chapter 34. I gravitated back over to the same Starbucks I'd visited yesterday. The wind had picked up, a chill reminder that even this far south, a cold front had passed through. I parked, gathered my jacket tighter around me, and walked past a bougainvillea that didn't look too happy about the temperature drop. Minutes later, with my latte in hand, I drifted back out to my vehicle and made a call to Penn. She recognized Alex's lawyer's name. He's a shark, she said. The kind who seems involved any time there's a high-profile case where he has a chance to get some shyster off the hook, or to look good on camera. He's a very handsome man. I wonder why Alex thinks he needs a lawyer at this point. He accused Rosalie of being out to get him, basically. Do you think that's why? I'm having lunch with Benton today, and I shall ask that question. Better yet, join us if you like. I demurred for about 4 seconds. She convinced me that the food at a place called Mickey's was well worth it, and the atmosphere was casual. She gave directions, and I agreed to meet them at 11:45. A vivid blue Tesla glided into the Starbucks parking lot, catching my eye. But what caught my eye even more was the driver, Alex Papard. He got out and sprinted inside, came back a couple minutes later with a grande cup in hand. He wore the same black Zuckerman look-alike outfit, with the addition of the jacket that had been on the chair in his condo. Maybe I could learn something if I followed along to see how his morning unfolded. I can't say that I'm an expert at stealthy following, but I've had a little experience over the years, and the bright blue car was fairly easy to spot from a distance. Alex drove as though he were on a racetrack, zipping and dodging other cars, and I worried a little about losing him at a traffic light. But he soon got onto the ramp for the 101 loop, heading south toward Paradise Valley. I sort of prided myself on knowing vaguely where that was. A few exits farther, the Tesla left the loop and made a couple of quick moves, pulling into the lot of a huge funeral home. Luckily, there must have been a funeral in progress, because the lot was full enough. I had no trouble keeping out of Alex's sight. I parked where I could watch his car as he got out and walked inside. If he was here for the funeral, I could be wasting an hour or more. But he told me he had an appointment. Surely that meant he was here to make arrangements for Eddie's ultimate destination. My wait was actually shorter than I dared dream. Alex came back out 15 minutes later, hopped in his car, and glided out the exit. I didn't quite glide, but I was right behind. Next move was north to Shea Boulevard and east to Fountain Hills, where we ended up, not surprisingly, at the Sculpted Rock Casino. Alex drove up to the valet parking stand while I watched from 20 yards away. The young valet on duty glanced around and left. The man who came out through the massive glass front doors had a familiar size and shape. It was the huge goon who'd warned me away last night. I stared, half hoping Alex would get the same warning. But of course, that was not to be. The big guy reached into his jacket and came out with an envelope. It might have been my imagination, but the parcel seemed stuffed with cash. Okay, yeah, there's no way I could actually know that. Alex handed him something in return. A receipt? Yeah, right. But it could have been a drug packet or something like that. I reminded myself to stick to the facts, and other than witnessing some kind of transaction, I really knew nothing. As Alex pulled away from the portico and I prepared to follow, I saw the goon look straight at my vehicle. Instinctively, I slid down to get out of sight. When I risked a peek, the big man was scanning the whole parking lot and Alex was already out the exit and into traffic. Suddenly, I just wanted out. By the time I got on the street again, Alex was nowhere in sight, so I decided to give up on him. I wasn't quite sure what I'd learned, but there'd been some action this morning, and I could either report it to the authorities or file it away in my little mental storage bank until I needed the information. I pondered all this as I headed toward the lunch place where Penn had invited me to meet her friend Benton Case, former district attorney of Maricopa County. For some reason, I'd expected a place named Mickey's to be one step up from McDonald's, but of course with Penn this was not the case. I walked into a small but classy spot with a European flair and white tablecloths. She was right about the casual atmosphere, though. Jeans and sweaters were prevalent, with the trim, silver-haired man sitting next to Penn, wearing the only business suit I spotted. Benton rose from his chair to greet me by name.
Penn has told me all about you.
Hopefully not all, such as my role in letting Sophie break into the house when she found Eddie's body. I smiled and took the chair he pulled out for me. We spent a few minutes in chit-chat and looking over the menu. Benton said he always had the fish special because the chef's sauce was exquisite. He actually used the word exquisite. Penn was debating between a salad and a soup. I went with the same salad she chose. I went by to see Alex Papard this morning, I told them.
Did he actually tell you anything?
Benton seemed curious. He says he has no idea where Dixie O'Connell is, and about Linda Ratcliffe, he called her his stepmother and claimed she was wonderful and generous with his father and with him. That was after I brought up the subject of money.
Penn sputtered. Stepmother? No, Linda never married Edward. She never would have.
Alex says otherwise, and it sounds like he feels perfectly entitled to all of her money now that his father is gone.
What rubbish!
She looked toward Benton for support.
I spoke with Detective Hernandez again this morning. He says Alex Papard claimed his father's body.
I reached into my purse and handed him the card from Alex's attorney.
Oh, this is one of the dirty players for sure, he told us. You've heard of ambulance chasers? This guy is an estate chaser. He has a reputation for upending estate plans, ripping up trust documents in open court, Basically grandstanding, and his clients are the very epitome of the Edwards and Alexanders of this world.
You mean he could actually have Linda's wishes overturned in favor of Alex?
Depends on how ironclad her will and trust documents are. Did she make any changes in recent months?
I glanced toward Penn and we all went silent as the server delivered our plates and asked about refills for our water glasses. I honestly don't know, Penn said once the young man had moved away. Rosalie is still going through everything to see what she can learn. She did find an amendment dated several years ago that gave Edward the right to continue to live in her house. But Rosalie says her mother thought better of it, realized what a mess that would become, and changed it back. Alex called Rosalie a couple of nasty names and says she coerced her mother. He argued with me that Linda married his father. Surely that can be disproven in court. Benton gave a sad shake of the head.
Each small point probably can be proven, such as the fact there was never legal marriage. But you never know what will happen in a courtroom. I've seen people just like Rosalie, with what seemed like ironclad cases, get overturned and have their lives upended by a greedy outsider like this Eddie. Judges and juries can make terrible mistakes when they fall for a con artist story.
I picked at the cranberries in my salad, and I noticed Penn hadn't touched hers. But there are appeals, aren't there? Ways to get someone to take a reasonable look at the whole picture? He swallowed the bite he'd been chewing.
Ideally. And this is what I'd advise your friend Rosalie. You don't want it to go to court. The process and legal fees will eat her up.
So, what? Pay the scumbag even more money to make him go away? That's extortion. I caught the fact that the people at the next table had overheard, and I lowered my voice. That's crazy. How can crooks get away with this? He dabbed his mouth with a cloth napkin in his lap, then placed his hand over mine.
Charlie, it happens every day. If only the lonely and lovesick people of this world could spot these shysters before they get involved. But they don't.
I thought of both Linda and Dixie, each widowed about a year before Eddie came into their lives. Had he watched obituaries, seeking out a vulnerable woman and setting up his plan? It wouldn't surprise me. Penn sighed. It's so sad, especially considering the amount of money these crooks have already taken from the accounts. Rosalie's had to freeze everything so they can't get more. A smile crossed Benton's face and a dimple showed.
And I'll bet a certain team of ladies are working on this.
She didn't answer, but the mood lightened a little. He was right. At least we were working on it. I discovered my salad actually tasted wonderful. When I was about halfway through my lunch, I decided to run some of the other names past Benton. In my search for Dixie O'Connell, I've run across several other people, and I'm finding links between them. Let me know if you're familiar with any of these. He gave a nod. Jorge Gadiz. Seems to be in some upper management position at Sculpted Rock Casino.
Slick. He plays the hotshot, dresses the part, schmoozes the crowd at the casino, yes.
Is he into anything illegal out there? Maybe laundering the money or loan sharking or something like that? He shook his head.
We never thought so. Jorge, being in an official position, knows the gaming authorities could cause a lot of trouble. Fine the casino or shut them down. Fine him personally or send him to jail if they could prove a strong enough case. We watched him for years, but he stays just short of getting his hands quite that dirty.
There's a young woman named Carlene. Sorry I didn't get her last name. Worked with Dixie as a volunteer at a dog rescue place. I saw her later the same day out at the casino, getting pretty cozy with Jorge. Maybe she's a girlfriend of his? Maybe she was something of a go-between to facilitate the relationship with Dixie?
I'm not familiar with her name. I can ask around. If she's actually with Jorge, she'd just be the latest in a long string of women. He's known for having lots.
What about Dixie? I wonder if she might have been one of them. Apparently she loves to party.
I'll ask. A golfing buddy is head of the gaming commission, and they send agents around, undercover, to get a feel for activities that might bear watching more carefully. Informal surveillance. Eyes and ears, you know. If you have pictures of these women, I can put them out there."
I had a photo of Dixie I'd sneakily sent myself from Sophie's phone. I described Carlene as best I could. "Want me to try and get a picture of her?" Not that I wanted to take on another assignment right now. He shook his head as he looked at Dixie's picture.
"Send me this. You said this Carlene frequents the place, and I'll mention that to the commissioner."
"Thanks. There's another name that came up, Chaco Canor, who is somehow connected with
Valley Pawn. Law enforcement definitely know that one. He's been arrested and tried for illegal lending and using intimidation tactics to collect. Loan sharking. He's got a couple of enforcers. One's a huge goon of a man known as El Asesino, the assassin. His real name is Felipe Munoz."
I think Carlene was in a black Suburban with Chaco Canor last night. He let himself in the back door of Valley Pawn and said something to the woman in the car. I caught her name. Both Benton and Penn looked a little sideways at me.
"Please don't tell me you're lurking in dark alleys following that man."
"Okay, I won't tell you that." "Charlie, these are guys you don't want to cross. They don't mess around." I covered my nervous gulp by drinking some of my water. "I saw Alex Papard this morning. He left his condo and drove out to Sculpted Rock, pulled up to the front door, and exchanged something in an envelope with this Munoz dude."
"Did either of them see you?"
"I'm pretty sure they didn't. I stayed in my vehicle at a distance."
"Still, it's best if you don't go back out to the casino for a while. All of them, Jorge, Chaco, Munoz, have sharp eyes and excellent memories. They'll notice and they'll pay attention if they see you more than once."
"Good advice. I'll keep away." I noticed Penn was finished with her salad. It was time to wind up the lunch visit and get back to whatever I would do next. I offered to split the check, but Benton, the gentleman, insisted it was his treat. I left the two of them at Mickey's. As I got in the Highlander, I thought about them again. I liked the relationship Benton and Penn shared, and I wondered if they were lovers. At their age, maybe the passion had settled into a loving friendship. I adored that, and hoped Drake and I would have the same camaraderie as we grew old together. Chapter 35. I was halfway to Sandy's house before I'd fully formulated a plan for what to do next. My hostess wouldn't be off work for another hour or so, but that was fine. I could use some time on my own to ponder everything I'd learned. I let myself in and was immediately greeted by the cats. "Oh, no, you guys, I'm not putting out more food. Your mama knows when and how much to give you, not me." They continued to rub against my ankles as I walked into the kitchen and turned on the gas flame under the kettle. A cup of tea sounded good, and Sandy had picked up some pumpkin spice cookies at the bakery yesterday. I'd swear I remember her saying it was fine for me to help myself. So I did. For some reason, I tend to think better on the move, so I began to pace through the house. The cats quickly decided they couldn't be bothered with this restless new human in their midst, so they settled on the breakfast nook window seat and pretended not to watch me. I went through my list of suspects for the murder of Eddie Papard. Dixie seemed the most likely, no matter how much none of us wanted to see her accused and put on trial for it. He'd been found in her kitchen with her knife in him. The police couldn't ignore that, but I was looking at the deeper motives. Eddie owed money to some nasty guys. So there were Jorge Gadiz and Chaco Canor, and the loan enforcement team of Munoz and whoever the other weasel was. But in a lot of ways, it made no sense for them to kill the guy who owed them money. They were not the types who could get on the list of official debtors and stand in line for the courts to award them some money. Alex Papard, however, would be in line to inherit. In fact, he'd insinuated that he was somehow due Eddie's share of Linda's estate and seemed ready to put his sleazy lawyer on the path to collecting it. I knew Rosalie would fight that to the bitter end, but meanwhile, maybe Alex had taken matters into his own hands. Would he have actually killed his father so he could move up the line and get to Linda's money right away? Or did he see that as a lost cause, beyond what they'd already taken, and now have his sights on Dixie? That seemed more likely. Alex was closer to Dixie's age, and I'd gotten the vibe that he found her fun and interesting. Maybe he'd tried to seduce her away from his father. Maybe she was willing. She always acted younger than her age, so a 21-year-old wasn't outside her cougary realm. Father and son both wanted the same woman. An argument escalated. The kettle was screaming away in the kitchen, and I hurried from the living room to rescue it. With tea mug and a second cookie in hand, I settled at the breakfast table, thinking of Dixie. I went back to her coworker, Carlene. Benton had discounted her, but I still felt she was somehow a player in the drama. I was still mulling that thought when the connecting door to the garage opened and Sandy walked in. "I do love a short work week," she said, setting her briefcase on the floor near the door and shrugging out of her coat. "The bank is open Friday, but I don't have to be there. Yay!" I smiled and told her the kettle was hot. I also admitted to taking 2 of the pumpkin cookies. "I'm about to join you the minute I'm out of these clothes and into my comfies." She returned in under 10 minutes, minus the skirt suit and heels, snuggled into knit pants and a roomy fleece top. While she reheated the kettle, chose a tea bag, and fussed over the cat's dinner, I gave the CliffsNotes version of my day so far. The visit to Alex's condo, following him, lunch with Penn and Benton. "Busy day, you." "No kidding. And I still don't have a clue where to find Dixie, or even if she's the one who killed Eddie." Sandy nodded, her mouth pursed as she considered. A crime of retaliation, a crime of passion, or what? Exactly, what indeed? I ran through my list of suspects with her, hoping she would see something I'd missed, or that maybe my own thinking would settle on an answer by repeating. Well, in the retaliation as motive column could certainly go the men he owed money to, she suggested. I thought of that. Maybe there was a fight that got out of hand. Would they really want to kill their golden goose? And why would Eddie still owe them if he's managed to stash most of Linda's money in offshore accounts, as Amber suggested? Right. That makes no sense. So maybe the retaliation is coming from one of the women. Either Dixie or Linda could have motives there. Except, since Linda had nowhere near the strength to face down a man, at that point in her illness, it sort of throws suspicion back at Rosalie. True. Linda's daughter had been on my radar earlier, but somehow I'd let that slip. Maybe I should put her back on the list. I was seriously looking at Alex, Eddie's son. He just has that look about him, the modern kid entitlement. I get the feeling he has no scruples about cheating his way to the top. You see the types on the news all the time, everything from cheating on school assignments to forming corporations and raiding the assets for their personal fun, mansions, and jets. Are we seriously thinking he'd take cheating up a notch and include killing? Killing his own father? It's been a thing ever since Oedipus. True. Sex and money are 2 very powerful motivators. She'd carried her mug to the table and now enticed me with a 3rd cookie. I took one, even though I would probably regret it when I got back home to my bathroom scale. I'd say Alex is more into the money. From what Amber told us, his moves seem all about moving money in and out of a bunch of different accounts, as if tricking the police and banking authorities meant he was winning the game. Some little thing clicked in my memory banks right about then. I walked into the living room where I'd dropped my purse on the sofa when I arrived. In the front zipper pocket was the receipt I'd nabbed from Alex's jacket pocket. I pulled it out and looked at it. As I remembered, the slip of paper was a receipt from Valley Pawn. Whatever Alex had bought there, it was noted simply by a stock number, NC38295, and had cost $300 plus tax. The receipt was signed by Chaco Canor. What you got? Sandy was now at the refrigerator, scouting out dinner ideas, perhaps. I held up the receipt. Stapled to the back is a business card for the pawn shop. No idea why Alex would need their card, since it seemed he was already there. Something's written on the back, she pointed out. I turned it over. A partial address was written at the top edge, with a series of scribbled lines below. Sandy moved to stand beside me. Looks like a map. Maybe directions to the address that's written there? Let's check this out. I moved back to the table where I'd left my phone and entered the address. 15 Skull Canyon. Skull Canyon? Really? I swear you really have some picturesque place names here in Arizona. She laughed. For sure. Do you know where this is? Not really. Does the map say? I stretched the map larger to see where the little red balloon had landed. The address was on a Skull Canyon road. When I adjusted the size and moved the map back and forth, it looked like Skull Canyon Road appeared to be a winding track that led out of a nearby town called Sunny Valley. The contradiction of images made me chuckle. Okay, Sandy, I'm still lost. Any idea where this Sunny Valley is? North of the metro area, maybe an hour or so. I've never been there, but I remember seeing exit signs for it off of I-17, I think. You ought to verify that. I did, and she was right. Do you think this is a residence? A business? Try Zillow? I went there and entered the information, but there was no listing. It seemed the place was too far out for the real estate market to care much about it. There was one listing in all of Sunny Valley, and I wouldn't describe it as a charming little place. It and the surrounding neighborhood seemed beyond fixer-upper. It was definitely run down. Alex wouldn't have had this map unless there was some reason important enough for him to go out there, and the connection with Chaco Canor and Valley Pond is undeniable. What do you say? Do I agree with the statement? Yeah, seems obvious. Do I have a clue about the important reason? Sorry. But all at once I did have a clue. All the clues that had been collecting for days now. I have to go out there. Now. No. She placed a hand on my arm, as if that would stop me. You're not heading out there, at least not on your own. I told her what I'd overheard between Chaco and Carlene as I hid behind the dumpster last night. It just hit me. I think they had Dixie drugged in the back seat of his Suburban. Alex would only have a map if he planned to join them. They're probably threatening her or Sophie, so she'll give up her passwords. I turned to look deeply into her eyes. You don't have to come, Sandy. Finding Dixie is my mission. Hey, the heist ladies are in this with you now. Let's gather some help. Chapter 36. Mary was in, no questions asked. Sandy had told me about her background, how she was homeless after her ex took everything, how she'd fought to get it back and became a martial arts expert as she took on a new business venture. Now she arrived at Sandy's house, ready to kick some butt. Gracie arrived 10 minutes later, a little breathless. All set. The kids were curious, but Scott has all three of them content to watch TV. They actually agreed on which movie that would be. She looked around. Is Penn coming? We decided not. There could be a confrontation, I told her. I was a little worried about her safety at her age. Don't let that fool you, Sandy said. Penn's super sharp. But yeah, I agree with Charlie, Mary added. We don't know what we'll run into out there. There was a little debate over the vehicles to take, one or two, SUV, minivan, or sedan. In the end, the Highlander seemed most suitable with its four-wheel drive and third row of seats, given the fact that we had no idea what we would encounter. The mission was to come home with Dixie in our custody, but we had no idea whether that was possible. I felt doubts creep in as we stopped to gas up. What was I doing here? It was a little after 9 p.m. when we exited I-17 for Sunny Valley and wound our way through low hills for 10 or 12 miles before we came to any signs of life. Pretty much as our Zillow search had showed, there wasn't much left of the town, which Mary informed us had been some kind of military outpost in the 1800s, and never did take off as a retirement mecca the way so many other places in Arizona had. The two-lane paved highway formed the main street and boasted a concrete block gas station/convenience store, with peeling paint and a faded sign. It appeared to have been closed down years ago. Margie's cafe was similarly shuttered, and Jake's liquor store looked iffy at best. At 10:30 p.m., we spotted only a couple of lights in houses, which sat back on the town's one cross street. The residences were an odd mix of Depression-era bungalows and what appeared to be a 1980s attempt to revitalize with more upscale structures. "Hard to tell how many of these places are actually occupied," Gracie commented. "My guess, not many." "Sandy, consult our little map and let me know where I should turn." We brought flashlights, and she pulled hers out and aimed it at the back of the Valley Pond business card. "It shows that intersection we just passed, so it looks like the next right-hand turn will be it. Then the road does some wiggles, and he's put an X on the left." The so-called wiggly part of the dirt road had a number of side roads carved out in both directions, and I tried the first two only to find myself on tracks that petered out right away. I backed out of each and tried again. A broken and faded real estate sign indicated this might once have been an attempt at a subdivision. "Ladies, what do you think?" "I spotted a light," Mary said. "Maybe another quarter-mile ahead?" I realized it was so dark and so quiet out here that everyone in town had probably heard our vehicle pass through or spotted our lights. Of course, if Chaco Kaner's place had any kind of security in place, a high lookout spot, sentry guards, or dogs, we were toast already. 2 more bends in the road, and I spotted the light Mary had noticed. I cut the Highlander's headlights and let the SUV roll along as quietly as possible until we came to what must be the driveway on the left. I cruised past, and we all stared at the collection of structures. A house sat at the end of the long drive. A vehicle was parked in front of it, but it wasn't the black Suburban I'd seen before. Was Chaco here, or did the plain sedan belong to a bodyguard? Or did we actually have the right house? The good news came from the bluish light at a large uncurtained window. The TV was on, and hopefully had masked our approach. I drove past the place, turned around, and positioned our ride a little beyond the driveway, in what I hoped was the best getaway position possible. "I'll go scout it," Mary offered. "You haven't seen Chaco. Maybe I'd better do it. I'll be right back." I left the key in the ignition and shut my door quietly. Aiming my small flashlight directly at the ground helped me avoid the ruts and toe-breaker rocks along the drive as I made my way toward the 2-story Spanish Mission-style house. On the left of it was an attached garage with 2 bays. On the right stood a separate casita with dark windows. 2 other small buildings sat behind that. I didn't risk flashing my light toward them. I guessed them to be garden sheds or small workshops. The property had a dozen or more tall trees, desert varieties, and an attempt had been to landscape around the house with bougainvillea, bird of paradise, and a variety of cactus. I glanced toward the large garage, wondering if there were additional vehicles inside. The only way to know how many people were on site was to check it out. I avoided stepping into the pool of light from the front window, doused my flashlight, and used ambient light to make my way around the thorny plants so I could peer inside. A television screen the size of a royal banquet table was mounted on the wall to my right, and a man was sprawled on the sectional sofa across from it, sucking down a Corona Light to go with his football game. It wasn't Chaco. I scanned the rest of the great room and didn't see anyone else, but there was a light from another space to the left. A glimpse of countertop told me that would be the kitchen. I backed away and circled the house toward the second light. The kitchen was sleek and modern and a total mess. Dirty dishes stood in haphazard stacks on the counter. Beer bottles covered half the center island, and a very greasy-looking skillet sat on a stove burner. An overflowing trash bin at the end of the island spewed takeout containers, and 2 pizza boxes lay nearby. I guessed that it took more than just one guy in the living room to create all this clutter. A step back gave me a view of the rear of the home. Besides the kitchen and living area, there were 2 smaller windows I judged to be bathroom or utility room sized. A long blank wall could be the back of the garage. Upstairs, a row of 4 windows probably indicated bedrooms and baths. A sliding glass door to the left led to the great room, showing me a long dining table that sat between me and the big space where the guy was still there in front of the television. A smaller walk-through door stood to the right.
"What are you doing?"
came a whisper in my left ear. Mary stood there. I slapped a hand over my mouth to suppress my shriek. My leg bumped something, and sharp cactus spines went right through my jeans.
"What are you doing here? We all got worried. You've been out here almost 15 minutes, and we were afraid they'd caught you. Did Sandy and Gracie come too?"
I asked, gingerly touching the denim to see whether the cactus had left its thorns with me.
"No, I told them to give me a few minutes to find you, and if neither of us came back, they should go for help." "Okay, go back and tell them I'm fine."
I gave the quick recap of what I'd seen and the layout of the house as much as I could gather. I pulled her away from the view of the windows, making my way toward the walk-through door that I hoped would lead to the garage or show me a way to get upstairs.
"Do we even know we have the right place?" "I'm going inside to see what I can learn. I'll text you. If I don't find any evidence to connect the place with Dixie or Eddie, I'll get out and we'll try something else."
I turned the doorknob and it opened. Mary didn't seem overly pleased with that plan, but someone needed to go back and reassure the others or we'd lose our ride back. She walked away, not even bothering with her flashlight. The woman must have the night vision of a cat. I stepped inside and gave my eyes a minute to adapt to the dark. I was in a short hallway, almost a vestibule, with some cabinets on one side, a doorway to a laundry room ahead of me, and another door. By the grimy handprints on it, I guessed this went to the garage. I opened it and peeked out with my handy flashlight. Yep, garage. Both bays were empty. The one nearest me had tracks on the concrete floor, and that empty space feel that meant something was normally parked there. The other bay held a couple of large toolboxes, the red ones professional mechanics use, and a mountain bike with one flat tire. I backed away and took a long, slow breath. So far, nothing I'd seen was connected with my reasons for being here. A shuffling sound around the corner raised my heartbeat a notch. I realized I was only 5 or 6 feet from the kitchen, and someone was in there. I stepped into the laundry room and flattened myself against the wall. The fridge opened, bottles rattled. It closed again. A beer run for Mr. TV. The footsteps came toward me and I held my breath, but they veered in another direction. There must be a bathroom nearby, because in a moment I heard the distinctive sound of a male aiming a stream into a toilet. Of course. That's what went along with emptying a beer and starting another. I remained quiet until he'd finished, burped loudly, and picked up his new beer. Then a phone rang. Must be the guy's cell, because he answered with, "Yeah." 2 seconds of silence, then, "All quiet here. Stuff you put in the water really works." Another 2 seconds. "Okay, see you then." Whatever that meant. At least the unknown man had shuffled back toward the television and I could breathe again. I hovered at the edge of the kitchen until I could see him across the room and be assured he was absorbed in the game. I spotted a flight of stairs leading upward. But did I dare cross behind the man and try for them? Only an open shelving unit divided the spaces. Again, I wondered, what if we had the wrong place or I'd somehow misread the whole situation? Then I looked down. At the base of the kitchen island lay a pair of women's red cowboy boots. Exactly like Sophie's. Chapter 37. A buzzing started in my ears. Dixie was here. Without giving myself time to think about it or chicken out, I slipped past the shelves and headed for the stairs. Thank goodness they were carpeted. I peered from the landing down to the living room and saw the guy was still absorbed. A long hall stretched in front of me, with doors leading off both sides of it. The first led to a bedroom, where I ducked in long enough to send a fast text to Mary. "I'm upstairs. Dixie's here somewhere. One guard as far as I can tell. I'll find her and figure out how to meet you guys." In response, "I'm coming too."
Don't come inside, just watch the man. Let me know if he heads upstairs.
A thumbs up emoji.
I jammed the phone into my back pocket and began to systematically check the rooms. Some of the doors stood open, so I gave them only a quick glance. A master bedroom with ensuite bath, another bedroom with 2 bunk beds, a small study. That one interested me enough to go in and check it out. A roll-top desk sat against a wall with tall windows on both sides of it. The small drawers were too many to go through, but the cardboard box full of bundled cash looked interesting. I pulled out my phone again and snapped a picture of it. The flash went off. Shit, I'd better be careful. No sound other than the game on TV came from downstairs, and I took a careful peek in the hall before exiting the study. The last door at the end of the corridor was closed. That had to be my target. I headed straight for it and gingerly tested the knob. Locked. That never stopped me. As a kid, I'd developed tricks for breaking into my brother's bedrooms to get into their stuff and gather blackmail material for favors in exchange for my silence with the parents. I'm an old hand at this. Except that I'd left my purse in the Highlander, and I wasn't at home where I had a supply of paper clips and bobby pins and other gadgetry. I stood there a second thinking. The roll top. It was like an office supply store at my fingertips. I went back there and located the perfect thing, a business card that had been laminated to just the right thickness. Back at the locked door, it slid between the knob and strike plate, and voila, an open door. I shone my flashlight inside, making certain I hadn't just opened a pit of vipers or a cage of lions or something. But no. The sparsely furnished room held a single bed with a lone woman who groggily raised her head when the light hit her face. Dixie O'Connell, I whispered, slipping into the room and closing the door behind me. I switched on a small lamp on a nightstand. She rolled over and pulled the puffy comforter more tightly around her shoulders. I recognized her from the pictures on Sophie's camera, although she was dirty and disheveled, and there was no ready smile this time. I shook her shoulder. Dixie, I'm here to help, to get you out of here. You need to wake up. Her eyes focused on me finally, a little. What? Dixie, I've been with Sophie. I brought her home to you, but we couldn't find you. Her head nodded, but she really seemed out of it. Pay attention. I need you to focus, Dixie. I need to get you out of this house and back to Sophie. Sophie? She's here? Almost. I can take you to her. Water. So thirsty. She reached for a glass on the nightstand, and I grabbed it away from her. On the floor beside the stand were several plastic jugs with more. No, not yet. You've been drugged using the water. We'll get you some that's better, but you have to come with me. Can you sit up? I got an arm around her shoulders until she was sitting in the middle of the bed. She gripped her head with both hands. Headache. Awful. I'm sure. I don't know what they've given you, but we can get you to a doctor once we're out of this house. Exactly how I would manage that, I had no idea. Was the guard armed? Who had been on the phone with him, and were they on the way? I propped Dixie up and got a text out to Mary. Found Dixie, upstairs last bedroom at end of hall. Can you knock out the guard and get here to help? Sure. Semi-kidding about knocking him out. Go carefully. Okay, now if I could just get Dixie on her feet and Mary could lure the guard out of the way, we might be able to stumble to my car and beat it out of here. I turned back to the moaning woman on the bed. Okay, Dixie, let's take a step this time. My name's Charlie. I need for you to stand up if you can. Carlene? No, it's Charlie. Charlie Parker. But she was focused on something behind me. I spun around to find Chaco Canor standing in the doorway, and right behind him was Carlene, who I suspected was no longer going to be on Dixie's friend list. Charlie Parker, we meet at last, he said, giving me an oily smile. Benton's words came back to me. I was facing down one very nasty character, and his henchman was now pushing his way into the bedroom. Dixie started to sob hysterically.
Chapter 38. My phone and flashlight were gone, and the space where they shoved us was black as pitch. When the hulking guard stormed the room and physically lifted Dixie from the bed, and then Chaco pulled a gun on me, well, there weren't many options but to go along. All I knew was that we were in the smallest of the outbuildings, in the middle of God-forsaken country, and the door had just slammed shut and a padlock clicked on the other side. The place must have been a potting shed at one time. It smelled of garden chemicals like fertilizer. The floor was either very gritty or made of dirt. I wondered if they'd left any shovels behind. Maybe we could dig our way out.
Dixie, you okay? Yeah, I'm here.
Her voice came through much more clearly than earlier. I hoped she was coming out of the effects of the drug. She'd been pulled from the bed, barefoot and wearing dirt-crusted jeans and a plaid shirt.
Charlie?
It was a new voice, one I knew. A cell phone flashlight light came on.
Mary!
Joy and despair flooded me.
They caught you too.
Yeah, damn it. I had a ninja move on that guard so I could get upstairs to help you, but the jerk knew the counter move. He whirled and whacked me on the head. Then Chaco and Carlene showed up. Once Chaco pulled the gun, I wasn't arguing anymore. She was sitting with her back to one wall, her knees bent, one hand massaging her temple. She looked around.
I could use some water.
Me too, Dixie said. Carlene had carried 3 bottles of drinking water as the men hustled us outside. Now I knew why, when I saw them sitting on a shelf.
No, don't drink it.
I explained how I knew the water had been drugged. Dixie got an almost desperate look on her face.
Sorry, there has to be something addictive in there, something that makes you keep wanting it, so we've got to get rid of it.
I took the bottles and poured them out on the ground before she could stop me. I considered our situation. Our team was down to a banker and a housewife.
What about Gracie and Sandy?
Mary shook her head.
I don't know. I left them in the SUV and told them to stay there until they heard from us. How'd you keep your phone? Chaco took mine.
She tugged at the waist of her jeans, showing she had a pair of yoga pants on beneath them.
I felt cold all day.
Guess that was good. I had my phone tucked into the inner waistband.
Excellent. Tell Gracie and Sandy to get out of the area and then call for help. Got it.
She picked up the phone, swiping at the screen to enter a number. The light began to flicker and dim, and then it went dead. We were plunged into darkness again. I'd had time to take note of what was in the shed with us. No shovels, no picks or axes, not a tool of any kind. There was a narrow horizontal window high on one wall, but I'd already assessed it. Even if we'd had something to break it with, I couldn't see any of us, not even Mary with the narrow hips and firm body, being able to squeeze through it.
We'll wait it out, said Mary. People know where we are.
I hoped so. Prayed that Chaco had not caught Sandy and Gracie, or we were pretty much cooked.
While your phone was lit, did you happen to notice what time it was?
It's a quirk of mine, always wanting to know.
Yeah, a little after midnight.
I glanced up at the skinny window where I could barely see a few stars in the night sky. Morning sky.
It's Thanksgiving Day and I'm as far from home as ever.
My mood plummeted again. Chapter 39. Time passed. I dozed a little and weird dreams filled my head. Images of stormtroopers and running men and the flashes and booms of a war zone. Cold seeped into me from the ground. Someone moaned. I roused enough to remember where I was. Mary was dreaming too, muttering in her sleep. Dixie was the one who'd moaned. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, realizing I could see a little. Flashes of light were visible at the high window. The images of my dreams became real.
Wake up!
I reached out and jostled the others.
Something's going on outside.
Mary came to her feet almost instantly.
Look, lights.
I pointed at the window.
Those are red and blue. Law enforcement?
Mary said. I had a vision of cops taking Chaco, Carlene, and the guard away into the night and the three of us being left here until we mummified.
Make noise. We have to let someone know we're here.
I began kicking at the door, pounding with my fists. Dixie let out an ear-shattering scream.
Yow, that's painful,
Mary said, covering her ears, but she joined in with shouts of her own. I kicked and pounded the door until my hands throbbed. Eventually, I heard a voice. "Hey, someone's in the shed."
"Yes, we're in here. Let us out."
We all joined in. A bright light shone around the edges of the door, and I heard scraping sounds. A pry bar or bolt cutter? I didn't care. Somebody was working on getting the door open, and it didn't sound like Chaco's bunch. When a chubby guy in a state trooper uniform finally yanked the door outward, I was never so happy to see anyone in my life. He seemed too confused to ask who we were, and we were too exhausted to explain. I had only one question.
"Two of our friends were here, waiting at the road in a green Highlander. Are they okay?"
He looked around for the answers.
"I'm not sure."
He didn't need to invite us out of the shed. We all poured through the doorway. The dark night was now lit by a dozen or more vehicles, eerily reminiscent of the sight I'd witnessed during that odd night at the Sundowner Motel in Holbrook. But I didn't have time to think about that. I needed to know that Gracie and Sandy hadn't been captured, stuck into one of the other buildings on the property.
"Who's in charge here?"
I asked the officer who'd let us out. He glanced around and pointed toward a woman in a pantsuit and overcoat. I ran toward her, panting as I blurted out my question about our friend's safety.
"I'm Special Agent Darla McGee, and you are?"
"Charlie Parker, from Albuquerque. I'm here to—" I realized the whole explanation would take way too long.
"I just need to know that Chaco and his gang didn't harm Gracie and Sandy. They were sitting in a green Toyota out on the road in front of this house."
"There was no vehicle in front of the house when we arrived. We've been gathering evidence against Chaco Canor for months now, and we got a call from a Detective Hernandez in Mesa about 2 hours ago." It seemed logical to me that the only way Hernandez knew to send all these other agencies out here must have been because he heard it from our heist ladies team. I had to be content to wait before I'd know for sure. I thanked McGee, and then someone else stepped up and tapped her shoulder for attention. I looked around and spotted Mary and Dixie, talking to a man I hadn't thought I'd ever care to see again. Hernandez. Dixie was limping on the rough gravel in the yard, and I asked someone to get her boots from the house. "Near the kitchen cabinets," I told them. Hernandez herded us all into a vehicle in the driveway, where he confirmed what I'd hoped to hear about Gracie and Sandy. They'd been questioned and released to go home. He took statements from the rest of us and told us Chaco Canor had been on the radar of the FBI and IRS for criminal usury, or loan sharking, for months. There was a hint of professional smugness as he took credit for phoning the tip to them.
"You'll need a ride," he said. "Where to?"
I wasn't sure. I wanted to verify where Sophie was. Mary's phone was dead and mine was missing. Did anyone take a phone from Chaco? One with a cover showing a photo of a cute brown and white spaniel? Hernandez actually smiled.
"Like this one? Somehow I didn't think this cover was Chaco's taste, and Carlene swore it wasn't hers."
I had enough battery for one call, and I made it a quick one.
"Gracie Nelson's house,"
I told Hernandez.
"We're all gathering there."
"Sit tight in the car. I need to do one more thing here, and then I'll give you a ride."
He got out and left the heater running for us. My little inner devil was tempted to slide behind the wheel and take off, to get back to the big city and wind things up without delay. But that would cause a great big drama, and truthfully, I didn't have a whole lot more fight left in me. It was a little after 3 a.m., according to the dashboard clock. I slid down in my seat and closed my eyes. Chapter 40. I awoke when the squad car came to a halt at the curb in front of Gracie's house. The Highlander sat in the driveway, a nice reassurance that my friends had made it home safely. Well, that and the fact that the rental had come back unscathed. The house was dark, except for the porch light and one downstairs room. Mary got out of the back seat and told Dixie where we were. I turned to Hernandez. "What about Alex Papard?
Was he involved in all this too?
That's a whole separate case. Edward Popard was merely the link between them.
He didn't seem much inclined to say more. I got out and wished Hernandez good luck, betting I would learn more from the heist ladies than the cops would ever share with me. The three of us walked up to Gracie's front door. We were debating whether to ring or knock when the door flew open. Sandy and Gracie came bursting out. They grabbed Mary and me in huge hugs with a lot of laughter and a few tears. Gracie let go of me and turned to our companion.
Dixie, it's so good to meet you finally. There's a girl upstairs who's going to be absolutely thrilled that you're here.
We all tiptoed inside and up the stairs, where Gracie led us to the guest room where Sophie had been staying. She eased the door open and pointed to the sleeping form on the bed. The room was softly illuminated by a nightlight in the adjoining bathroom. Dixie pulled off her red boots and slipped onto the bed beside her daughter. I swore I saw a single tear trickle down her cheek.
Let's figure out what the rest of us are doing,
Gracie whispered, drawing the door closed and heading for the stairs.
Oh my gosh, Amber's still on the video chat,
Sandy said as we entered the kitchen. She walked over to the tablet that was propped against the cookie jar.
Hey, you still there?
Guess who just showed up? Mary and I got into the picture to say hello. I flinched a little at my appearance, smoothing my messy hair and rubbing my hands over my face to bring a little color back to the wan complexion staring back at me. Mary wiped at a dirt smudge on her own face.
You found Sophie's mother?
We did. They're snuggled together right now. Gracie offered coffee or a couch and blanket, our choice. I opted for the coffee. My hit-and-miss sleep over the past few hours had surprisingly revived me.
So what happened? Sandy and Gracie told me where you found Dixie. Was she there all this time?
Amber asked. I don't think so. Remember the night I had you trace the plate on the big dark SUV? I filled everyone in on the snippet of conversation I'd caught between Chaco and Carlene. I'm pretty sure Dixie was in the back seat, drugged into oblivion, and that's probably when they moved her from wherever she'd been, out to the place in Nowheresville. Amber nodded.
I found something that made me think they were trying to snatch Sophie from you. Not sure about the reason. Maybe to use her as leverage to get Dixie to do what they wanted.
I'm sure my expression revealed my curiosity.
It involves Alex Popard. You told me someone woke you up by pounding on your motel door?
Yes, the night we stayed in Holbrook.
Pretty sure that was Alex. Because of the time frame, we'd pretty well ruled out either Eddie or Chaco.
Right, but Alex? How on earth did he even know I existed? Or that Sophie was with me in some random place off the interstate?
Dixie had received a call from social services telling her you'd be bringing Sophie home. Maybe she shared that with Eddie. Maybe they later intimidated her until she told. Not sure. But he had your name and knew your general route. I found trackers online where he'd searched your credit card records and learned the motel where you were staying.
Wow. I felt the blood drain from my face. Scary how much a person can find out.
Well, not just anyone. I told you, this guy has awesome hacking skills.
So has Alex been arrested in conjunction with the rest of this? I asked the question to the group in general. No one knew for sure. I remembered Hernandez's comment that Eddie's theft of money from the accounts of the women in his life was a separate case from the loan sharking racket run by Chaco and his henchmen. And how did Carlene, Dixie's supposed friend and the lover of dogs, fit in? I realized there were still a bunch of unanswered questions. My crazy week from hell wasn't over yet. Chapter 41. Sandy suggested that she and I go back to her place to clean up. We can be back in plenty of time to help get the big dinner on the table, she said. Questions and other thoughts were swirling through my head, but a hot shower and clean clothes would take precedence over everything else at this point. Daylight was barely a suggestion on the horizon as we walked into Sandy's house and headed for our own rooms. I shed the clothing that had seen me through half a night on a dirt floor. I spent a good long time in the shower,
letting the hot water soothe the aches from my limbs, choosing a soft red sweater and clean jeans. I packed everything else. My mission was accomplished, although there were some goodbyes to be said. And although Thanksgiving dinner wasn't happening for hours yet, the heist ladies couldn't seem to stay apart as the latest case wound down. Albuquerque beckoned, but I couldn't resist being here in person to get the last of the details. We still didn't know who had killed Eddie Peppard. We were back at Gracie's by mid-morning with mimosas and handheld mini waffles for a light brunch. Amber was still on video at her spot on the tablet. So cute. Rosalie came, along with Penn and Mary. Dixie and Sophie were freshly showered and couldn't stay apart. I was thrilled to see that Sophie's reason for running away apparently had not been her relationship with her mom. The two were clearly very close.
"Hey, Sophie!"
Gracie's daughter shouted from the far side of the great room.
"You gotta see the Rockettes! They're in the parade!"
Sophie rushed away to catch their performance on TV.
"She's in the phase right now where she wants to be a Rockette when she grows up,"
Dixie said.
"Next month, who knows?" "So, Dixie,"
I said, lowering my voice so the kids wouldn't hear. "What happened? Where were you all that time?" She sank onto one of the bar stools at the counter.
"I went home early from the dog rescue. That was Thursday. I knew you'd be there with Sophie soon, and I wanted to get the house ready. But the minute I walked in, I knew something was going on. Eddie was in the kitchen, and there was a shouting match going on. Some argument about money and this other guy demanding more. I turned the corner and was about to tell them to take it outside. I wouldn't have that kind of fighting in my home."
She took a sip of her mimosa.
"This big guy, Chaco, shoved Eddie and he fell, hit his head on the edge of the counter, and he was staggering around trying to stand up again, furious. He pulled a knife out of the block, a big kitchen knife, but the other guy got it away from him, and I don't know how exactly. He rushed Eddie, and the next thing I knew, the knife was in his chest, and he was down on the floor. I guess I screamed or something." "Oh my gosh, Dixie,"
Amber said, looking shocked.
"Chaco spun around and grabbed me, and I was so scared he'd kill me next. He dragged me out to a big black truck thing, and some other guy was waiting in there. At first, he said he wouldn't hurt me if I'd just give him the money for Eddie's debts." "What debts?" I asked. "I didn't know Eddie borrowed from guys like that." "We went out to the casino, and I thought, oh, okay, Jorge will explain things. I knew the casino crowd. Carlene and I used to hang out there some. But in the middle of the afternoon, it was different. No band, no partying, just all these mean-looking guys, and all they said to me was they wanted money. If there's one thing I'm super responsible about, it's making sure Rob's money was kept safe for Sophie's education and our future. I wasn't about to pay off Eddie's gambling debts with it." "How'd you end up at that place so far away?" Mary asked. "And drugged. We could barely get you to wake up." "It's really fuzzy. I guess they spiked my drink. Once in a while, I'd wake up a little and I was in a hotel room. I think at the casino. But then later, I was in a dark bedroom somewhere. No idea where or how I got there."
Rosalie had been quiet, but now she had a question.
"How did you and Eddie get together? I don't know if you know any of the history, but he'd been living with my mother, pretending they were married, while he systematically cleaned out her life savings. It sounds like that's what he was after with you."
"I think so. At first, it was all about having a good time, just hanging out, drinking and dancing, gambling a little at the casino, but not much. Carlene first took me there because she liked Jorge a lot. You know, working together, she knew I'd lost my husband and was just looking for some fun. She knew I wasn't hurting for money, although I don't think I ever told her how well set Sophie and I were. Maybe she said something? That'd be my guess."
"So that would have been sometime last summer?" Rosalie asked. "That's when he started spending less time with Mother. She thought it was because she got sick. Once he knew she was dying, he had no further interest. Something like that."
"Sounds like he simply found greener pastures,"
I suggested.
And don't forget the money movements we discovered, Amber added.
I heard from Carlene this morning, Dixie said. She's really upset and super sorry that she got me involved with Eddie. She admitted she faked being me on the phone with Sophie. Jorge apparently ordered her to do it. She says she's ready to turn her life around, but I doubt I'll ever trust her again. Too bad. It was a fun friendship while it lasted. Dixie glanced toward the other room, where teen laughter was prevalent. I've got more important things in my life now anyway. Rosalie set her plate down, hard enough to catch our attention. Well, that Edward Papard, that man was evil. I'm glad he's dead. We all turned a little shocked. He can't do this to another woman ever again. I'm glad too, Dixie said simply. I won't miss him at all. Sadly, none of us would. I wondered how Alex felt about his father's death. I hadn't detected a whole lot of sorrow from him either.
There is some good news, Amber said. You all know how I've been working on tracing Linda's money to find out where Eddie and Alex stashed it? With all these law enforcement departments climbing over Eddie's business, we couldn't take the chance they'd freeze those accounts and make you wait years to get your money back. And it's coming, has already come, right back into Linda's accounts. Rosalie, you now have access again to your parents' savings.
Rosalie went pale for a moment, then her eyes filled with tears. Penn, Gracie, Mary, and Sandy smiled, not at all surprised at this revelation.
Oh, and I may have phoned in a little anonymous tip to let them know Alex was the one orchestrating the thefts in the first place.
I had no idea how she could keep her own electronic fingerprints out of their sight, but that was apparently Amber's superpower. One more question lurked in my head, maybe related, maybe not. Back to that night Sophie and I were in Holbrook. I woke up to a bunch of flashing lights. Law enforcement seemed to be out in force, several different apartments, even a fire truck or two. They were totally silent and left after a few minutes. I never did figure out what that was all about. Mary looked up sharply.
That was the same night you were there? I read something on the news.
She pulled out her phone and brought up a page from her browser, reading aloud. FBI and IRS agents enlisted help from various local Arizona law enforcement agencies as they staged a raid on a small roadside motel in Holbrook. The targets were two males suspected in multiple financial crimes. Other than stating that the man was not located on the property, the agent in charge declined to comment on the crimes, their victims, or the source of the tip that led them to the small town in northeastern Arizona. Eddie, Chaco, Alex? It could have been any or all of them. My phone rang, showing an unknown number. I stepped out of the crowd to take the call.
Happy Thanksgiving, Charlie. It's Harvey Molson. Are you back in Albuquerque?
The old man's memory was still quite sharp on some subjects, I decided.
Not quite. We're working on it, though.
Jeannie and I are having a nice Thanksgiving dinner here. She's been feeling better, and we'll go down to the dining room in an hour or so.
Did you ever get your car back?
I'm afraid not. The police had no luck, but the insurance company paid for it. It was also suggested to me that maybe I'm at the point in life when I should give up driving. So I suppose I'll be taking the community van to run my errands from now on.
Sounds easier, for sure.
How's young Sophie doing? She was giving you some fits last week.
I glanced through the doorway and into the family room, where the teens were busy thumbing away on their phones. Sophie had her red boots on again. Things are a whole lot better now. I wished him well and we said goodbye. It was time for me to do the same. Chapter 42. With a call home to Drake and assurances that the highways had been sufficiently cleared, I bade an emotional farewell to the heist ladies. With each hug and invitation to return, I knew I'd made 5 new friends. Friends for life. Make that 7. Dixie and Sophie were over the top in their appreciation, something I rarely receive from our regular clients at RJP. There were more than a few moist eyes as I walked out the front door and got in the Highlander, waving goodbye to the group huddled at Gracie's front door. I sailed along on this leg of the trip, much easier than the first time through. Traffic was almost non-existent, as people gathered with family and friends instead of battling it out in their cars. I hit the outskirts of Holbrook in under 3 hours, and, thanks to calling ahead, was able to switch my trusty rented Toyota for Ron's Mustang in just a few minutes' time. Someone had freshly washed and detailed it and kept it stored in the garage during the week I'd been away. I slipped a generous tip to Casey, asking her to be sure the right person received it. On Interstate 40 once again, the miles flew by and I savored the silence. Although the last week had given me a renewed appreciation for camaraderie and those close to me. I thought of Linda and Rosalie, the loss and trauma for that little family. As for Dixie and Sophie, I hoped the teen would settle in and be happy in her life, even though I knew full well that she was in for some hormonally tumultuous years before she matured into whatever she would become. Maybe a rockette. When I topped the crest of 9 Mile Hill outside Albuquerque, the setting sun at my back, the glittering cities spread out below in the distance, I felt a little tightness in my throat. Being home for the holiday really was going to happen. It was 10 minutes to 6 when I walked into Ron and Victoria's snug bungalow. The scent of roasted turkey practically made my knees weak, and I spotted bowls of side dishes and 2 pecan pies on the kitchen counter. Drake and Freckles swooped in to bestow me with a pack hug. Elsa, my beloved Graham, was nibbling olives from the relish tray, and her caregiver Dottie was helping in the kitchen. I felt myself smiling at the rightness of it all. Home. It felt good. This concludes Road Trips Can Be Murder by Connie Shelton. This novel is a work of fiction. Names, characters, and places and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. If you would like to receive our online newsletter listing new releases, simply go to booksinmotion.com and register with your email address. Newsletter members receive special discounts and freebies. No purchase necessary. That's one word, booksinmotion.com. From Books in Motion, this is Rebecca Cook. Thanks for listening.